Will it cost lives? Let's get reaction from Stuart Andrew MP, who is the Shadow Health Secretary. Good morning, Mr. Andrew.
Good morning.
Do you think that harm will be done to patients by the strike today?
Well, undoubtedly. I mean, there'll be a lot of people who were expecting to have their appointment or some treatment over the coming days that will have been contacted to say that that's had to be cancelled or rearranged, and that is the concern that I have. It is for those patients. The direct impact of these strikes on patients is the number one consideration that I have in my mind today.
Most definitely. Do you admire the Health Secretary Wes Streeting's strong stance on this? He won't buckle, he won't be bullied, and he won't allow the country to be bankrupted by these demands.
Well, these are strong words, but he made it sound so simple when he was in opposition, didn't he? I mean, we had a difficult situation on our hands with the strikes. He said it's really simple. You just get round the table and it'll all be sorted. They then came into power. They gave these inflation-busting pay rises without any conditions whatsoever and proclaimed, there you go, we've solved the strikes. But we warned at the time that if you don't give the pay rise without conditions, then they'll come back for more. And sadly, that is exactly what has happened.
It has come to pass. How do you see this playing out?
Well, I mean, the reality is that there are some within the BMA, I'm sorry to say, who have, become quite militant, and that is having a direct...
Well, it's a rapidly left-wing union, isn't it? When people hear British Medical Association, it sounds like a really groovy organisation that's about, curing people of cancer and fixing a broken leg. It is a politically active organisation. It's shifted left in recent years, by the looks of it.
Yes, it really has. And actually, I have spoken to people from within the BMA who have said to me that they are concerned about the direction that some of these people are taking the BMA. And the Times are reporting this morning, of course, that they've done polling of doctors that showed the majority are not in support of these.
Yes.
These strikes. So, there's a fundamental problem. So strong words is not enough. We need some backbone to stand up to this. And I'm afraid what the government are doing by introducing the Employment Rights Bill is that they're actually going to give better opportunities for the BMA to cause even more disruption, because they're going to lower the threshold that unions need to cause a strike, and they're going to get rid of the minimum service levels that we introduced to ensure that there were a safe number of nurses and doctors and porters and catering staff in hospitals at times like this. So I'm afraid they've made a really difficult situation even worse in the future when this dreadful bill becomes law.
Do you regret that the NHS became so expensive, so bloated on the watch of the Conservatives?
Well, look, I'm trying to take a very considered approach in this role. I have said that I'm going to take time to look at the detail. I think we've got to get away from saying how much we're supporting the NHS by how much money we put in there. Of course, that's important. This has to be about outcomes. How do we get the best outcomes, the best place to work for the staff, the best place outcomes for patients? That's the measure of a truly successful National Health Service, in my view.
But isn't it time for talk of cuts in the NHS rather than endless investment, given the fact that outcomes are getting worse as the cost rises?
Well, look, I mean, the government have announced some reorganisation. I don't think they're handling that particularly well, because they didn't exactly explain where the money was going to come from to do those reorganisation. But where they do reform and where they do reorganisation it's going to work, is going to improve productivity, is going to improve outcomes for patients, then we will back them. But we haven't seen enough of it yet, and that's what we're waiting to see comes further down the track.
And, Mr. Andrew, a fresh scandal befalls the BBC. It appears that the rather misleading clip on Panorama was not in isolation. We've got a developing story courtesy of an exclusive in the Times newspaper that a second flagship programme, this time Newsnight, 2 years previously to the Panorama broadcast, also had a very edited, misleading clip of Donald Trump, which played out, and a former Trump advisor and chief of staff, Mick Mulvaney, called out the misleading clip on Newsnight. Nothing was done by the corporation. The BBC have already apologised to the president. It seems like they're going to have to apologise again.
Absolutely. I mean, look, I was the Shadow Culture Secretary, and I said at the time of the horrible stuff that happened at Glastonbury that, as someone who's been an advocate of the BBC, they're making that really hard for people like myself by some of the actions that we've seen. So to have done this editorial hashing once was bad enough, but now that it's happened twice shows that we need some fundamental changes at the BBC. 2 senior resignations is not enough. There has to be more control over some of its elements and how it's producing news.
Briefly, Mr. Andrew, an absolute icon of the Conservative movement is Lord David Frost, chief Brexit negotiator. I'm sure you admire the man. He got Brexit done in partnership with Boris Johnson. He's live in the studio on Morning Glory in 20 minutes' time at 9 a.m. I'll be asking him why Reform UK are ahead in the polls. Why do you think they are?
Well, look, I'm long and old enough that I have seen political parties rise in the polls, and then when the election comes, the result is very different. I'm not suggesting for one moment that there isn't a serious issue for us as a party, but that is why I am full square behind Kemi, because she recognises that, and she is bringing forward a whole suite of policies that have been carefully considered. Her conference speech was probably one of the best leaders' speeches I have heard in my political career, because she talked about hope, she talked about aspiration, she talked about how cutting taxes will be a feature of our government, and how we will have that golden fiscal rule of making sure that every pound that's saved, half of it goes to getting the deficit down and dealing with debt. The rest will be on tax cuts and investment on what will make the economy grow. I think when it comes to the election and people are considering the detailed policies, not just listening to a one-man band, I think we will start to see a shift.
Stuart Andrew, lovely to meet you for the first time. First of many encounters, I hope. Stuart Andrew MP is the Shadow Health Secretary.